if you are somebody who had to take on too much responsibility way too soon, like you had to grow up too fast, or you were made to be emotionally responsible or physically responsible for a parent, where the roles were reversed, one of the most common things that type of dynamic creates in a person is a stunted inner teenager or toddler. There is a rebelliousness that naturally comes out in the toddler phase, and it's a really good thing. It's part of the process of individuation and pushing up against the reality around you and the people around you. We do the same thing as a teenager. But what can happen is later on, as an adult, this person will go back and they will find themselves oftentimes living in a freeze state, a fawn state, or some type of functional hypervigilance. And when they go to actually check in with the emotional body and the body to start this process of reparenting, what people who were made to be responsible way too early in their life for other people, what comes up is this aspect of them, which you could consider either a toddler or a teenager, sometimes both, some type of energy like that in the system that does not want to take care of the emotional well-being of you, right? So they don't want to parent these inner children. They don't want to take care of the body. They don't want to do all the should, would, could. They don't want to do what anybody else is telling them to do, because there's an aspect that's still stuck in the past and in a state of powerlessness, because a lot of people's childhoods feel like prison to them. So this aspect is stuck in that powerlessness. And the only way that it knows itself, the only way that it can create a sense of power is through rebelling, is through pushing against or pushing away. So that's what I mean when I say stunted, is that process of individuation that takes place as a toddler and as a teenager and really throughout our entire life should be a process of not only what's a no for me, but what's also a yes for me. But the problem is that a lot of people are not living in environments with healthy, other conscious and healthy people, to where there is any space for their authentic and personal truth. And if there's no space for that, or if you're not seen or not understood, or it just doesn't really matter, or there's no place to process these emotions, the only sense of power that you have in that dynamic as a child or as a teenager, as essentially a prisoner, is to do what? To say, I'm not going to do anything. And so I'm not going to, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what you do want, because you're not going to get it anyways. You already internalized that, and that's the conclusion that you've come to internally, whether you're aware of it or not. So the only thing I can do is to say, I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. And so the entire identity can become formed around what we are not, what's a no. And that's important. That's an important stage of the development. But we have to start to move. Once we recognize what's going on there, then there's several things that have to happen. So first of all, that aspect needs to be unburdened. So the part of you that doesn't want to take care of yourself, that doesn't want to be responsible for X, Y, and Z, that is actually a part that we do not want taking care of the central vulnerability. That's a child or a young adult, a teen, that good. We don't want that. So we want to say thank you. First of all, thank you to the part that allowed you to rebel against something that was a no for you, because there's a power of agency in that. But then we want to start to unburden that child or teen and say, you know what, that's not the part I actually want taking care of my most vulnerable aspects. But we have to recognize that it's a part Because whenever there's resistance to taking care of the body, the being, the self, what we know is that that is a part. Because the aware ego, the larger consciousness, naturally has no problem caregiving, right? And so we have to work through these freeze responses, these nervous system responses that come up, and also the parts of us that are connected to those responses. And so this whole conversation came up because this is what came through with a client, and I've seen this with other people, that the only way to get movement, right? Like if it's like feeling stuck, like I just can't bring myself to do the things that I know I need to do to take care of myself, or I have so much resistance to caring for my own emotional needs. Well, that is a part of you that needs to be relieved from thinking that you are a child that needs to be protected. Because oftentimes those inner teens and children who are rebelling, right, they're just seeing the world from a place of, I have to push against. Everything is hard, right? Everything is about pushing against and rebelling against. And when you step into the power of the central I, the aware ego, which is what we cultivate in parts work and what we cultivate through heart expansion and consciousness expansion, that is the thing that's operating and driving the ship, aka your body, your being, your vessel. So it's the awareness that that's a subpersonality, that's an aspect of the nervous system that's getting flared up and triggered. And then we can start to unburden that part and say, you know what that part actually needs, what does that part actually need? Probably to be a kid, probably to be a teenager. And this is the process of reorganizing and finding new ways of relating to the internal world, because that's actually a part that had to go into that role to survive. But what is the authentic expression of that part of you? So if the authentic expression is not just, no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to take it, well, what do you want then, right? That hasn't even occurred to those parts oftentimes, that's a thing. What do you want? What does feel good? And so then you start to bring that part out when there's play, when there's light, when there's something else. Because as we're on this journey, right, we're always anchoring into something new, something more coherent, something safer, a little bit of a sprout that we're watering within ourselves. And in some cases, that might be joy, that might be play. And that's really where those parts need to come up and come out. The ones that are like, I don't want to be responsible. Okay, that means that we need something other than being responsible. That's actually the medicine for that part. And that's what creates the healing experience. And then more trust that you as the center self, as the aware ego, are capable of orchestrating these various aspects and understanding them and acting on their best interests. So I hope that makes sense. I mean, that's like one example of an adaptation that can come out of being made to be responsible for too much too soon. A lot of times, people will they will take on that role and that'll be the caregiver in them, or that'll be the hyper responsible part that works really hard. And that's a way of staying out of the deeper emotions that are behind that. There's so many different ways that it manifests, but that shut down, that freeze response, that kind of like, I'm just not going, right? It's because there was no real agency in the childhood and in the development. So there's no sense of power behind the, what do I want? How do I actualize that? What was available was, I only know my power, and I only can feel and know myself by what I am pushing against. So we have to start to also build a culture with developing beings and children where we consider them as a concept. We consider them. We consider what they need and what they want and their feelings, so that they don't only know themselves based off of what they are not doing or what they're pushing against, right? Because a boundary, a sense of self, is not just the no's, it's the yeses. All right. I hope you guys are well out there. Have a beautiful weekend, and see you around in another video.